Hello, it's John Heaton. This evening I'm going to review this album from George Harrison, Living in the Material World, released in June 1973, and it was the long-awaited follow-up to All Things Must Pass, and it got to number 1 in the US and number 2 in the UK, and it spawned a big hit single, Give Me Love, which was top 10 in the UK and number 1 in the US. This is a worthy follow-up to All Things Must Pass, and it was very well received at the time by most of the critics and by the public, but it's pretty much a forgotten album these days. Not a lot of people talk about it. People tend to concentrate on All Things Must Pass, and this tends to get forgotten, which is a pity. I've got two versions of this to show you before I go through the tracks. This is a UK original. The gatefold sleeve is George and his friends living in the material world there. Gary Wright, Jim Keltner, Nicky Hopkins, Klaus Voormann, Jim Horn and Ringo, taken in a house in LA with the big car in the background and various other trappings of the material world. So this album attempted to reconcile the difficulty in being spiritual and also being a pop star millionaire. And George was trying pretty hard at the time to reconcile those differences, and the following year he would fall off the rails slightly, but here in 73 he still, I think his personal life was more or less on track, although his marriage was beginning to be on the rocks. This is Hare Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita book. These are the words. Very nice packaging on this album, and this edition is on this label with Hare Krishna here and the car on the back. That was the original pressing in the UK for sure. And then I've got a German press, and also another thing, I don't think you can pick this up on the camera, but I was looking at this more closely. Side 1, on the inner groove, the guy who cut the vinyl has written Hare Krishna, and on side 2, he's written Hari Rama. So I like it when the vinyl cutter, has a bit of a laugh. You don't often see that. And then the German edition I have is pretty similar packaging, but notable for being on the Apple label, which is pretty unusual. Not sure which other countries featured the Apple label, but this is, as I say, it's a German pressing. And I think it's about the only George album I can think of which featured the green apple at all, because All Things Must Pass was on the orange apple, and I don't recall seeing any of the other records on Apple. Bangladesh? No, I don't think so. Okay, so let's go through the tracks. Give Me Love, superb opener, and this song is definitely on a par with All Things Must Pass. It's a very strong song, and even Paul McCartney was generous about it in the press at the time, saying nice chord changes, nice guitar solo, because the two were not getting on too well at the time. And George actually makes fun of Paul on the back here, saying Jim Keltner fan club, for all information send a stamped undressed elephant, which was making fun of the Wings Fun Club, which appeared on the Red Rose Speedway cover. So anyway, Give Me Love, brilliant song, stood the test of time, this one up there with George's very best. And then the next song is Sue Me, Sue You Blues, which is a little bit out of place perhaps compared to the rest of the material, because it's not a religious song at all. It's a song chronicling the dissolution of the Beatles' partnership, which had just taken place a couple of years before in the courts. This song is pretty bitter. There's a bit of humour in there. Like, we started off quite poor and got Richie on a tour. because Ringo used to be called Richie. And great slide guitar playing from George, and this is the closest to a rocker that you're going to get on this album. It's not really a rocker at all, but it's more got more oomph to it, whereas the rest of the album is mainly ballads and religious ballads at that. But anyway, so that's a great song, although a little bit bitter. Then we've got The Light That Has Lighted the World, which is a glorious tune. Nice piano playing from Gary Wright, brilliant guitar solo in the middle of the song, and nice philosophical words. George sings this one beautifully. Love this track. Don't Let Me Wait Too Long is a bit more upbeat, catchy song. I love it. Quite philosophical lyrics again. Religious slant to them. Very nice acoustic guitar and very nice melody. Play this one loud. It's great. Who Can See It is as one book, I think it was Bob Woofenden said in The Beatles Apart, this is a little bit high for George to sing, and he struggles to hit some of the notes, although I saw one writer said it was George's best vocal ever, which I don't agree with. I think he does struggle a bit to sing this one, but it's a very nice tune, and he sings it okay, and nice instrumentation. This whole album, by the way, is produced by George, with the exception of one track co-produced with Phil Spector, and it's a lot less clustered than All Things Must Pass. There's a cleaner sound to the production. It's mainly just the band, Gary Wright, Jim Keltner, Klaus Voormann, although he does lay on the strings on some of the tracks on side 2, and shows that he didn't need Phil Spector, because he can reproduce the production with the strings possibly to better effect than if Phil Spector had been involved, which is saying something. So he certainly learnt something from Phil during the time he worked with him. And where was I? So Who Can See It is a great track. Living in the Material World, the title track. I suppose this is almost a rocker, this one. It struggles a bit because the word material is not that easy to sing, and it doesn't really scan living in the material world. It's a little bit strange, but yeah. Actually, it started off quite poor and got Richie on a tour. That line was from this song, Living in the Material World, not from Sue Me, Blues, sorry. Anyway, it's a good track. It's not among George's best tracks by any means, but it's decent, and it's good to have an upbeat track on the album. Side 2 opens with The Lord Loves the One. By the way, this album got really criticised by some people for being too preachy, and some people got upset because they didn't share George's religious beliefs, but he's entitled to express them, in my opinion, in the same way that Bob Dylan was during his Christian albums, and that doesn't offend me. And I think this song, The Lord Loves the One, is a little bit unfortunate because it's a little bit preachy, the lyric, but rescued at the end by one of George's best ever guitar solos, and his guitar playing throughout this album, I'm happy to say, is nothing short of brilliant. Possibly even better guitar playing here than on All Things Must Pass, because he's not being assisted by Eric Clapton. It's just George playing all the lead guitar parts on this album, all of the lead guitar parts. And it's a shame that after this, the subsequent albums, Dark Horse and Extra Texture, for example, did not feature much guitar. But on this one, his guitar was up front and was on every song to great effect. And it made the album a whole lot better than the two that followed it, in my opinion. So, where are we? Be Here Now is a lovely ballad with a brilliant tune, and very meditational, and love it. Very sparse musicianship, instrumentation, which suits the mood of the song. Try Some Buy Some was a track he'd written for Ronnie Spector and was recorded 2 years earlier with Phil Spector producing. Again, the key that it was in was a little bit high for George, but he said what the hell, he tried it, and he sung it okay, but he's struggling to hit the high notes, which is a little bit noticeable. But it's a good song, and maybe not the most religious song on the album, because this is all about the temptations of drink and drugs, probably. David Bowie covered this a few years ago, interestingly. The next song, The Day the World Gets Round, is in similar vein, possibly a little bit too similar. Maybe they could have sequenced the album a little bit differently. The Day the World Gets Round is another luscious ballad with great strings, and was a reaction to the whole Concert for Bangladesh experience, which was left George with a little bit of a sad taste in terms of how the world was going, and so that's reflected in the words. But it's a good tune. This album isn't that uplifting. It's a little bit sad, some of the words, or serious, should we say. It's not a happy album like George Harrison from '79, but I would call it majestical and majestic, serene tunes, or even glorious, if we're going to get religious about it. And then That Is All is a great closer to the album. Beautiful melody and nice words. Times I find it hard to say with useless words getting in my way. Silence often says much more than trying to say what's been said before. Love it. It's a great song. Harry Nilsson covered this song a couple of years later in good fashion. So that was George Harrison, Living in the Material World. I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10. It's pretty near perfect, and actually probably prefer it in a way to All Things Must Pass, because it doesn't include any annoying third jam disc, and it's underrated in the same way that All Things Must Pass is possibly overrated, because they're pretty much of a muchness in terms of quality in songs. And for some reason this one is not talked about, so that's why I've talked about it. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.